Hey everyone, this is David Brown with the migration update for April 14th, 2024 from the Braddock Bay Hawk Watch. Kim and I started out the day at the Braddock Bay East Spit, where after all of yesterday's wind, it was a fairly calm morning. The lake was very calm as well, but it was a bit gloomy and rainy. The highlight of the morning was this sandpiper with a relatively long bill and some black in the belly. This is a Dunlin. From the East Spit, we had a total of 43 species. There was a big band of rain coming, so I actually came back to the house and cooked breakfast. I got out to Braddock Bay Park around 9:45, and the rain was just tapering off, but it was still pretty gloomy. But it didn't take long for it to turn into a pretty nice day with partly to mostly sunny skies. The winds were kind of crazy today. They started from the east, and then they shifted around more to the south, and then eventually to the southwest. And then at some point in the mid-afternoon, the northeast lake breeze kicked in for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then a stronger westerly wind overtook that to end the day. So just a day of crazy weather from all the rain and clouds and sun and shifting winds. While walking over to the platform, this sparrow caught my eye. And here's another look at the same bird in flight. Overall, it's a somewhat pale, stripy sparrow. On the face, maybe the most distinctive thing is a bold, pale white eye ring, and we also see some chestnut color to the leading edge of the wings. This is a Vesper sparrow. Here we have a turkey vulture migrating over low in the morning, and although the conditions were pretty good by the mid-morning, it took a while for the flight to really get going, and the numbers were relatively low for the first few hours. Here we have a medium-sized blue and white water bird with a very thick bill. This is a belted kingfisher, and we know it's a male because it only has the blue stripe. It does not have any brown underneath. Here is one of two crows that flew over, giving nasally calls. This is a fish crow. Here we have a hawk that's shaped like a flying cross with a long tail and long rounded wings. We see that this bird has a large head, and we see that the tip of the tail has a rounded appearance because the outer tail feathers are shorter, making this a Cooper's hawk, and the orange barring underneath indicates that this is an adult. Here we have some large dark water birds with long necks and fairly long tails. These are double-crested cormorants. Here's a bird that perched up in a tree and is facing away from us, so you're seeing the back of the head. We see the front of the bird is bright yellow with a black bib, and the back of the bird is more camouflaged. This is an eastern meadowlark. And perched in the same tree, we have another bird that's got some drab brown patterning to the back, but also some yellow highlights as seen here in the tail. We see some red on the back of the head and a black mustache, making this a male northern flicker. Here we have a large dark raptor, although it does have a significant amount of white underneath as well. We see a large head. This is an immature bald eagle. And if we look at the trailing edge to the wings, we see it's uneven. We have some retained juvenile feathers that stick out farther than the feathers that have already been replaced. Here's another hawk with a long tail and long rounded wings. We should be thinking accipiter. We see orange barring underneath, so we know it's an adult of either sharp-shinned hawk or Cooper's hawk. The way we tell them apart is we see this bird has a small head, a very squared off tip to the tail, and overall looks a little bit more compact, making this an adult sharp-shinned hawk. Here we have another accipiter. Again, note that long tail and long rounded wings. On this, we do see a bit of a rounded tip to the tail and a larger head with very straight wings. This is a Cooper's hawk. And if we look at the underside, we see that it's mostly white with some brown streaking to the upper breast, making this a juvenile Cooper's hawk. A flock of horned larks flew over, so I tried to photograph as many of them as possible, and this bird was mixed in. And the main thing that stands out on this bird is that it has a black face and black throat. This is a breeding plumage male Lapland longspur. And compare that to this horned lark where we see a lot of yellow in the face and a bit of a black bib and a little black to the face, but not that extensive black that we saw on the face of the longspur. Here we have a hawk that from the overall shape we can place in the Buteo genus. We see that it has some brown barring to the underside, a straight trailing edge to the wings, and a dark tail with a single wide white band to it. This is a broad-winged hawk. Here's another broad-winged hawk gliding directly overhead. And yes, we actually had Kettles of broadwings today. So up until today for the season, I think we had something like 13 broadwings. But today we had nearly 200 broadwings in small groups, maybe up to 20 or 30 at a time, mixing in with the turkey vultures. Here we have some large grayish tan birds with long trailing legs and a long neck. These are sandhill cranes, and we had a pretty good flight of sandhill cranes, with the largest flock being a group of 8. The flight really picked up in the afternoon, and it was pretty steady for about 2 hours. Here we have a mixed kettle, and the larger birds are turkey vultures, and the smaller ones are broad-winged hawks. And that good flight continued until around 3 o'clock when the lake breeze kicked in, and that pretty much shut things down. Here we have a large, lanky, black and white raptor. This is an osprey. And here's an adult bald eagle that gave us a nice flyover at the end of the day. Taking a look at the eBird report for the Hawk Watch, today we had 69 species. After the Hawk Watch, I made a brief stop at the owl woods looking for a barred owl that had been reported, but it was gone. Me and Kim went back out in the evening to Braddock Bay Park to mess around with the thermal and hopefully see some American bitterns leaving the marsh at dusk. Unfortunately, we did not see any bitterns or owls, but there was a huge swarm of swallows flying around, and it was really fun to watch those through the thermal monocular and just see how many there were. You know, when you see them in person up against the sky when it's getting dark, it's hard to count them, but the thermal really does a good job of making them much more distinct from one another. And as it got darker, I kept seeing things in the thermal, and at first I thought they might be owls, but then I was realizing how many of them there were, so I think that they were just bats swooping around and catching insects. And we watched some sort of mammal swim up the channel towards us, and we had a pretty close look off the end of the boardwalk at that. And there were a few white-tailed deer around the park that we never would have spotted if not for the thermal. I picked up 2 new species for the season today, which were a ruby-crowned kinglet at the East Spit and Vesper Sparrow at the Hawk Watch. Taking a look at the hawk count report for our migrant raptor totals, today we had 472 turkey vultures, 1 osprey, 8 bald eagles, 22 northern harriers, 81 sharp-shinned hawks, 4 Cooper's hawks. For Buteos, we had 5 red-shouldered hawks, 191 broad-winged hawks, 39 red-tailed hawks, and for falcons, we had 4 American kestrels, for a total of 827 migrating raptors. That brings the April total to 13,518, and the season total to 21,638. And taking a look at the forecast for tomorrow, they're calling for intervals of clouds and sun with a high in the upper 50s and winds west-northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. So that's not a super favorable or unfavorable wind. It's a decent wind and it's a good speed, so I would expect moderate migration tomorrow. For Tuesday, they're calling for sunny skies with a high in the upper 50s and light northwesterly winds. So it's a slightly less favorable wind direction, but very light. My main concern would be that birds will be difficult to spot if they get up high because of those cloudless skies. And for Wednesday, they're calling for cloudy with occasional afternoon rain, high around 50, and strong east-northeast winds at 10 to 20 miles per hour. So that's an unfavorable wind and gloomy conditions. Would not expect much activity. All right, another fun day of birding, getting out there to the East Spit in the morning rain, having a little break, going out and doing the Hawk Watch, and we had a pretty good crowd today because it was the weekend. It was really fun seeing that Vesper Sparrow and stuck around the whole day, so a lot of people got to come out and see that, get that as a year bird. It's really not a species we see very much, maybe once a year at the Hawk Watch, so it's something really special to see. And we had a really good hawk migration there in the afternoon, and then dipped on the barred owl, but got back out in the evening and got to mess around with the thermal. So a long, busy day of birding, finishing up my video now and going to sleep so I can do it all again tomorrow. Hope to see you out soon at the Braddock Bay Hawk Watch. From Lyco Birds, this is David Brown. Thanks for watching.